Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we got a 2010 Ford F-150 behind us. We're going to be doing a control arm on the driver's side. So I'm going to take you guys through the process. First place we begin is we got to get this tire off of here. So let me get this off and I'll get back with you guys once I'm in the control arm. Now that we got the tire removed, we are basically looking at our upper control arm. Now the reason why we're replacing this is this ball joint has failed. There's a lot of play into it. Typically, the way I would check this out once the tire is off, just to verify, is basically grab your control arm, and what you want to do is just move down on it. Now I'm going to be quiet. Hopefully, you guys can hear the little popping sound. So I'm pretty sure you saw this joint moving right here, and I don't know if the camera picked up the little popping sound it was making, but essentially this has gone bad. To take off this control arm, it's actually quite simple. It's not the worst thing. There's three mounting points where this basically gets bolted up to. One is right here. It's the ball joint. When this ball joint goes bad and you try to take this nut off, sometimes this whole joint will want to spin in there, and it won't want to take off the nut, simply because a lot of corrosion happens up here, as you guys can see. If that happens, I'll show you how I combat that. It's actually quite simple. It's not that difficult, but it can be a little daunting if you've never dealt with it before. The other two mounting points are basically one here and one there. There's basically bolts that flow through. Now, I don't know how well you guys are going to be able to see this on camera, but that's basically where the bolt goes into. It's actually right behind the strut assembly. What you got to do is basically hold that side. I do believe it's a 21, and then there is a nut portion on this side behind the liner. That's essentially where you unbolt it to get the control arm off. Now, sometimes it's a little difficult because this spring can be in the way. If I find that happens, what I typically do is I come up here and I remove my mounting bolts that hold the strut into the frame, and I can actually lower the strut a little bit or be able to manipulate it out so I can actually get my hand in there and be able to pull out the bolt. Now the bolts are pretty long back there and you have to pull them out all the way in order to get the arm out and slide it out. So it can be a little difficult. Hopefully this one doesn't fight me too much. Typically these don't. Usually the worst of it is just these rear bolts and removing this out of the way a little bit to make room. Aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set you guys up on a time lapse and I'm going to show you my process of doing it. So you guys saw during the time lapse that this basically was not moving, and then when I put my impact on it, it basically decided to pop off the ball joint. Now it is frozen on these threads because the way this works is this has a locking nut that has some plastic in there. I don't know how well you can see that little red area there. That's basically plastic embedded inside this nut. The way that you want to remove this now, there's three ways. You can grab the bottom of this and spin it off. That's one way. You can opt to use a pry bar here and kind of pressure on it down, and then you try to remove it. That's one way. The way I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to heat up this bolt here just to work off that plastic locker, because that's what normally hangs it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to impact it off. So I went ahead and made the executive decision to just cut off the bolt, guys. I tried heating it up and messing with it and just wasn't giving, and since I had the torch out, I just cut it off using the torch. So you'll see in the end there, the camera kind of drops out because I had to, grab that bolt from, touching anything rubber, make sure it landed on the floor because it was pretty hot. So now that we got that situated, you're going to want to take your hammer and just hit this up gently. And that'll basically take off your ball joint portion. Now the reason why I had to use a hammer is when I cut it off with a torch, you guys can see it's not a straight cut. Slag gets everywhere. So you just want to give it a couple taps to clear out anything that might be interfering. Now that we have the ball joint free and clear of the knuckle, you have the two bolts that are on the frame to take out. What you're going to want to do is basically hold the inside while you remove the nut on the outside, and then it should slide out. Now if it doesn't slide out, like I said, the coil spring can come out, the whole strut assembly. You can loosen it up here and drop it down a little bit, give you some clearance. I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to see if I can just get it out without having to remove anything. Obviously the less you touch the better. The option that you can do here if you really want to, now if you notice that this cover is in a way, the splash shield, now you can choose to remove the fender liner or splash shield, whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to do that because my wrench can easily fit in there. I don't want to mess with any of these connectors or plastic tabs and rivets that these liners have. So I'm going to put you guys on time lapse and you guys can just kind of watch the process. So not much to surprise, guys. I removed the nuts that hold the bolts on this side, and you guys can kind of see in here that they are not releasing. They are basically hitting the spring. So what I'm going to do is basically come up here and I gotta remove these nuts that hold on the strut. What you're gonna basically do is there's three of them. I already hit them with some penetrating oil, and you're gonna want to basically lower the strut assembly, and then as it drops a little bit, you'll be able to push it out a little bit more, and then you can gain access to the bolts to just kind of pull them through to the back. I'm gonna go ahead and time lapse it, but just kind of wanted to explain what I'm gonna be doing. So the time lapse basically will show how I fought to remove the control arm off. Now I did have to lower the strut here, and the bolts are kind of being difficult with me. As you guys can see, these bolts are fairly long and they basically got to go in through here. What normally happens is the spring here, it just doesn't allow you to be able to pull it out easily. That's why you kind of have to lower the strut here and kind of maneuver it and finagle it for it to come out. Now I went ahead and I got those out. It was a little bit of a fight, and I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be a fight putting them. Now I have you guys on the bench. I just want to show you guys a few things. So whenever you get your old part out and you got a new part, I always like to just check them by referencing them. Now I put them pretty much right next to each other. As you guys can see, it's identical. Now there is one upgrade that this arm offers that the factory arm didn't, and that is a Zerk fitting for grease. So this ball joint is greasable. What that is basically this right here. It comes with a little nipple fitting. It comes inside the box. It's inside the bag with the cotter pin. Now be careful when you guys open up your packages because this is just thrown in there. It's very easily thrown away. I've actually made the mistake of throwing these away sometimes and I have to go through the trash to find it. So just be aware that you have that in there. If not the Zerk fitting, you usually have a cotter pin. Now, normally cotter pins are easier to find than Zerk fittings, but why throw it away when they give it to you? Less hassle. So that will basically go right here when I'm done with the install, and I can actually pump up the ball joint with grease, and this makes this ball joint serviceable, which will make it last a lot longer than the original factory one that doesn't have a serviceability. To install this, guys, is pretty much going to be the reverse order of removal. I'm gonna time lapse it and kind of show you a little bit of it, but I'm not gonna go into great details here. It's essentially the same thing. You're gonna be fighting the strut to get the bolts through, and after you do that, you basically gotta tighten it up, but you gotta put weight on it. Now, once we get to that stage, I'll cut the time lapse and I'll come back on video. But just for us, for the sake of putting this back in, I'm gonna time lapse it just so you guys can watch me do it. So you guys saw me pretty much install the upper control arm in the time frame lapse there. So now I'm gonna tighten up the control arm. The way that you want to do this is you want to put weight, or you want to lower the truck, put the full weight of the truck on your control arm. Now, depending on how you do this, you may have to fully assemble it, leave those loose, and do it with the tire on. The way I like to do it is I put a jack stand underneath the control arm, and I lower the truck onto the jack stand, and I put all the weight of the truck onto the actual suspension. And then what I do is I tighten up my frame bolts. The reason why I do this is you want to tighten up those frame bolts in the position that they're going to be fixed. If you tighten them when the truck's in the air, they're going to be down, and then when you lower it, they're going to want to move into position, and that'll eventually keep them stretched. So you don't want to keep these things stretched and under tension. You want them to be at the right height when they're on the ground, because that's where they normally sit. And for the occasion that the truck gets lifted, it doesn't hurt it when they stretch once you lift it and the wheels kind of taper down. So I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera, guys. I've done this quite a few times. It's a real easy process. Just load up the suspension and tighten up your bolts. So let me get this done and I'll be right back with you guys. Now that we went ahead and we compressed our suspension, tightened up our bolts, one thing that I did in the time lapse, guys, is I used a little bit of blue Loctite on the nuts and bolts that hold this arm up to the frame. You guys saw in the time lapse, I went ahead and I tightened my ball joint as well. What we're going to want to do next is basically get the cotter pin and the Zerk fitting. And so now we're going to be installing our Zerk fitting. What a Zerk fitting is, guys, is basically this little guy here. Basically, it threads into the ball joint right here. It has a little check ball and spring in there, so you can pump grease into it, but keeps water and dirt out. This is what is the serviceable portion of it. The way I like to do this is I take it and I basically thread it by hand. Once you got that, now this one is an 8mm. You're going to take your socket and a little 1/4-inch wrench. Now these aren't necessarily threaded. What they do is they drill a smaller hole and the Zerk fitting cuts the thread in there. You do not want to over tighten these and overspin them. Once they get a little bit of resistance and they're tight, now that the Zerk fitting is tight on there, you're going to grab your grease gun. I got this nice fancy locking one, so you don't got to hold it on there. If you don't have a locking grease gun, you're going to have to hold it on there as you pump. And then you basically pump it. Now, you want to be paying attention to this boot. You're going to want to see that kind of plump up. That'll basically tell you that you have enough grease in there. You do not want to pump it like crazy, guys, and basically rupture that boot. You just want to get enough grease in there so everything is lubricated. You're not looking to pop that boot like a balloon. As you guys can see, she's starting to inflate there. I'm going to touch it a little bit more. Now, normally they have some sort of cutout that if you over grease this, the grease will come shooting out. This one I don't believe has that. So right about there, guys, I'm happy with that. I got enough grease in there. I gave it about 10-15 pumps. I see the boot is basically, getting a little fat there. That tells me she has enough grease in there. Now the next step is we got to do the cotter pin to lock down the ball joint. You just grab your cotter pin. Now, if you don't know what a cotter pin is, essentially this is a cotter pin. What you're going to want to do now on the ball joint, this is a castellated nut. I don't know how the camera can pick this up, but let me see if I could get in there for you guys. But you can see on this nut that there's a hole. You can see through it. And then the actual nut has little cutouts, like square cutouts in there. That's called a castellated nut. What you want to do with your cotter pin, basically it's like a jammer. You're going to want to stick this through that hole, and then you're going to open up these ends here like wings. So to demonstrate this for you guys, I'll try to get you as close as I can. And what I'm going to do is come up here from the back side. I'm going to go ahead and stick it in. Now you can clearly see that that went through. Then you're going to want to grab your side cutters or something, whatever you prefer. And the way that I like to do this, now there's going to be one short edge and one long edge. I like the long edge to be facing downward, so I'm going to go ahead and reposition this. So once you do that, now you grab it on the more open edge, and you're just going to want to basically move it down just like that. And then I use my tool here just to kind of make it into a square. And then I'm going to take the other edge and I'm going to bend it this way. Now I got to kind of move the camera here. Maybe I can do it. Let's see. And I basically lock it down like that. The control arm is in. All we got to do is basically put a tire on and torque it, and she's good to go. Now I have a few other things that I'm going to be doing to this truck. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this portion of it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. With that said, please comment, like, and subscribe. It'll definitely help my channel grow. And I just want to say thank you guys for watching, because without you guys, I wouldn't be here making these awesome videos for you. So I really appreciate it. My channel has been growing and I am very thankful for that. So thank you guys for that. Hope you guys have a great and wonderful day, and I will catch you guys on the next repair.